Hi, I'm Ems, aka on Deck and Wings, and in this video I'll be taking a look and reviewing the new Quick Gem paints from AK Interactive, specifically the starter set. The set itself comes with 8 paints, and it also comes with a thinning medium to thin those paints out, and it comes with a synthetic brush from AK. A cool feature I find with these paints is it tells you how intense they are, so from low, medium to high. And this doesn't mean how opaque they are, it just means the intensity of the colour, so how intense the hue and the tint of it is. I'm going to try each of these colours. I've primed some miniatures in white, which is the recommended thing to do when you're painting with contrast type paints. These miniatures are from STL Miniatures, they're a really cool range, and I've 3D printed these. I'll put the link in the description below. And we're starting off with the Space Magenta. I'm using the brush that this set came with as well. So what I noticed straight away is I really like the flow and consistency of this. It's not too thick and not too thin. It covers really nicely. It's not runny. And it has like this separation of two colours. So a lighter colour and a darker colour which goes into the recesses. It's also a very intense colour. Moving on to the warm yellow here, so this is a less vibrant colour apparently, but I still think it's quite bright, and once again you have that separation of lighter and darker, and the darker tones go into the recesses. This is a similar viscosity and consistency to the first paint, which is nice to see. And it doesn't have that thick gloopiness which you get with some contrast paints from Citadel. It doesn't really have too many tide marks on it. Moving on to the Vivid Flesh, so obviously this is a flesh colour, and it still had the same consistency and viscosity as the previous two paints. This is supposed to be a lower intensity colour, however it still did cover well. That basically means it's supposed to be less bright and pronounced as the other colours. It still did show up nicely though. However, I did find this colour a little bit too red for a flesh tone. I think it could have been a little bit pinkier than red. Moving on now to the Vivid Green, and this was a very vivid green. This was a high intensity colour. This was probably one of my favourites. It was really rich, warm colour. Once again, same consistency as the other ones. It's not too thick and not too thin, so it doesn't run everywhere. And I'm finding as well they don't have those like tide marks and marks which you see on some of the contrast paints from Citadel, and it's not as runny perhaps as some of the other speed paints out there. But overall I'm impressed so far with the range of colours. Next up is the Power Blue. This is once again a high intensity colour, and you can definitely see that. This is again one of my favourites. It covers really nicely, and I like that separation of the lighter and darker tones. I've had a lot of fun using these so far. I don't usually use a lot of speed paints, but I've really enjoyed these ones. Now moving on to the black. I'm using this more on a flatter surface, so usually speed paints don't cover as well on flat surfaces. However, this one was still pretty good. Once again, same consistency, which I love to see. It had more of a blue tone on the lighter areas, and I perhaps would have preferred this to be grey. But overall, it did cover nicely for a speed paint. Next up is Infernal Red. Again, this is a high intensity colour, and it definitely was, similar to the blue and the green. Once again, same coverage, same flow. I really like this red, it's a really nice colour. Red does naturally have slightly less pigmentation than other colours in the same way like yellow does, but I still think that this covered nicely. Last up is the metallic, so we've got a dark steel colour here. It's interesting to see metallic speed paints. I was really surprised with this one, it covered super well and was shiny. There aren't many metallic speed paints on the market. I think the army paints are the only ones which currently do them. This was more like one solid colour, but there was some slight variations of lighter and darker with it. You can't beat proper metallics. I still love Darkstar Molten Metals, but for a speed paint metallic paint, this is still really nice. And not forgetting the thinning medium which this comes with. So I'm going to be thinning down the green while that's quite an intense colour. The whole point of thinning down speed paints like this is to create glazes and washes with them. So as you can see here, it is more transparent compared to the paint just on its own. So these would be great if you want to do some glazes or some washes. And you can mix these paints together and make some washes and glazes if you want to. So I'm mixing the blue and the black together with some of that thinning medium. And I'm going to wash it over the pants of that model I've previously painted with the blue. I think it's great that they included this thinning medium with the starter set. It just allows you more range to paint with. I wanted to compare some other speed paints to these, so I've got a Citadel paint here, I've got the Bal Red contrast paint, and I'm comparing it to the red from AK. On the left is the AK paint I've applied, and on the right I'm applying the Bal Red Citadel contrast paint. Contrast paints are a lot thicker, and you can see the brush strokes more and the tide marks on them. I do find with the Citadel ones, you come across different consistencies, so some of them will have like one colour predominantly, whereas other ones might have a lighter and darker tone with them. Whereas the AK ones are more consistently the same thing, so those ones do have these lighter and darker colours within them. I just wanted to compare it to one last paint from Citadel, so I have the Black Legion contrast paint, which is one of my favourite ones. So on the left we have the AK one, and now I'm applying the Black Legion Citadel paint on the right. Black Legion colour covered better, whereas the AK one had that more separations of colours and was a bit lighter. Black Legion one overall had a better coverage with one coat, whereas the AK one you probably had to put 2 or 3 to get the same coverage. The Citadel ones are a lot thicker and you do get those brush strokes, so you would have to thin them down if you wanted cleaner coats. Next up, I'm comparing them to a speed paint from the Army Painter. So on the left, I have the Vivid Flesh from AK, and on the right, I'm applying the speed paint from the Army Painter. This is the Peachy Flesh Army Painter. They do have a similar coverage, but I do find that the speed paints are thinner, which might be a bit hard to control them with. I think this comes down to personal preference, really, but I do like the AK ones slightly better. So overall, what do I think of the starter set and the quick gem paints? I like the colours this comes with. I think they're all consistently similar in terms of the coverage and viscosity of them. I think they're covered really well. I like the fact that they have two-tone colours to them, so you can have some shading within your miniatures quickly. I'm not really getting any tide marks or brush stroke marks on these, so they're quite solid and crisp. I think personally the Vivid Flesh could have been a bit more pink rather than red, and I think this set would have benefited if it had some sort of wood and leather colour, or perhaps even a bone colour. And I did really like the metallic paint which this came with. I think the Speed Painter starter set is better in terms of the colours it comes with, but I do like the fact that it comes with the thinning medium with the AK one. And I overall really like these paints. I think I like them more than the Army Painter Speed ones. Another great feature with this range is there are over 80 paints within it. The other cool thing about this range is there are a bunch of different sets tailored to the specific projects you might be working on, including historical miniature focused ones. I think that a lot of this comes down to personal preference, but it has a larger range, like I said. Even the Citadel ones, including metallics, and they're thinner than the Citadel ones, and I don't think they're as shiny as the Vallejo ones from what people have said. The AK ones have more of a matte finish. The starter set for this is around about £25. I've seen it go as cheap as £20 on Wayland Games. I'm not suggesting you go out and buy the full range, but maybe get a couple of the AK paints or even the starter set just to see how you like them. I do have more paints from this range, and I will be reviewing these as well and using them in some projects, so you can check those out, including the metallic set. And as I said, not many other speed paints actually have metallic colours. Thank you for watching. You can help me on Patreon, the link will be in the description below. I'm on social media everywhere. Remember to enjoy your hobbies for yourself, and remember, at the end of the day, they're just war dollies. I'll see you in the next one.